Welcome to the Rebel Leader Podcast, Shattering the Status Quo. Brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board. Hosted by Dr. Joshua Ducharme, a leader with over 20 years of experience in education. Where bold educational leaders share their stories of breaking the mold and transforming schools and communities. If you're ready to become a rebel leader and shatter the status quo in education, let's dive in.
Hey, are you looking to scale your business from 5 figures to 6 figures or 6 figures to 7 figures? If you are, I have the perfect thing for you. What I want you to do today is I want you to go download a book. This book is going to take you through my 3-pillar system. It's 100% free. All you have to do is go to growfast.cash. I say again, go to growfast.cash and you're going to be able to download my free international best-selling book, which is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. You can take that book. It's going to help you scale your business to the next level. Again, go download it. Be good, be brief, be gone. Growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. Enjoy.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Rebel Leader Podcast, Shattering the Status Quo in Education. I am your host, Dr. Joshua Ducharme, and I am thrilled to have you join us today. This podcast is all about exploring how visionary education leaders are challenging the status quo and transforming schools in ways that truly make a difference. That's right. You're in the right place. Whether you're an aspiring leader or a seasoned educator, my goal in this podcast is to bring you inspiring stories, actionable insights that can help you lead with purpose and with passion. And on today's episode, our very first episode, actually, I'm very excited to introduce a very special guest, someone who's been an incredible influence in my life and in education and also personally for over 30 years. I'd like to introduce my dad. And today we get a chance to interview him, his personal journey throughout education as both an educator and also a school site principal, and all the things that he has to tell us. We're going to hear some amazing stories, both funny and also on the more serious note, get his take on what it means to be a rebel leader in today's education system. Before we get started, though, I do want to say thank you for being here and supporting the show. If you're ready to shake things up and break some molds in education, you're in the right place. Now we're going to jump into today's conversation. I'd like to welcome to the show, Dennis Ducharme.
Glad to be
Dad.
here.
Welcome to the show, Dad.
Glad to be here, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I am honored to have you on the show. The first one that when I first thought about starting this show, you were the very first person that popped into my mind. I thought if anybody's going to be my very first show, it's going to be my dad, for obviously sentimental purposes, but also too on a professional side, you've got the experience and the stories certainly to keep this show in the right direction and help people understand that education isn't such a scary place, right?
I've often said it's a good day in education, but there are certain ramifications that we have to look at and from the recent past and forward. But generally speaking, education is our cornerstone.
That is true. Education changes the world for sure. I'm a living testament of that. I mean, putting in about 20 years myself in the education world, teaching and both leading as well as a school site administrator. So we all know the ins and the outs, the goods, the bads, the uglies of all of that, and mostly goods. But there are some challenges certainly, both at the site level and then of course at the district and then of course at the state level. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about that. But I've always been someone that has been somebody that has broken that status quo and always lived outside the lines a little bit and been that rebel person. And I know that you have kind of been in that same limelight. So go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit about you and your journey in education, and so that way they can get an understanding of where you're coming from.
Well, from my perspective and from my own experience, my journey in education has been one that has been good and sweet at times, but often there have been other times where the challenges almost seem insurmountable. But my background is in education. I've spent my most of my career in that. I'm a graduate of the university here in the Central Valley of California. I've met a lot of people along the way that have helped me in that journey as well. I came to teaching because um, basically people in my background of my family were all educators. My grandmother was an educator. She was very well spoken, well written, and I could still remember times back where I would get these long letters as a teenage boy, and just seeing um, her expertise in being able to communicate and share her ideas only sparked the interest in me. And my dad told me at one point in time, you ought to be a teacher. So I come from a long line of teachers, and that's been an important part of my life. And it certainly has manifested itself in a way that I feel proud of, in a lot of different aspects of what it took to become the educator over time. But in most cases, I would say that I'm definitely happy. I'm retired now. I'm a retired educator, and that has a special sound to it as well. But I still keep my
Absolutely.
I still keep my ear to the ground and and both eyes open to see what's coming down the tubes, because it is a serious day for us
For
here
sure.
in America for
Yeah.
our educational system. But
Absolutely. Well, it's funny because everything you're saying sort of rings true exactly like in my sort of journey as well, right? So you at one point told me, "Hey, it'd probably be a good idea to be a teacher." So there's that, and then your dad and your mom also said the same thing. So that's kind of funny that we both had a very similar experience in that. And likewise, the idea of retirement, that sounds amazing. And just recently, I've stepped away outside of the classroom to pursue some other things also in education, but outside of that as well. And boy, let me tell you, having your ear to the ground is a lot easier than having to be foot on the ground, if that makes sense. So it's been bittersweet to say goodbye to the classroom, but in a different light. You're still involved in education. So I want to dive into. Thank you so much for all of that information. It really gives our listeners an understanding of where you're at, where you're coming from, and as well myself, like where I was raised and how I was pushed into education as well. So I'd like to kind of jump into the show a little bit, and let's start off with some fun stuff. So I can go ahead and start here, but I always remember, education is always this sometimes serious things, but then I've always thought about, like people should save their funny stories, right? And I've always told people whenever I've had new teachers, I've said, always keep yourself what I call the smile file. And it's just a file, a database, and it may actually be a physical file of funny things that you've seen along the way. But, I've seen some pretty funny things and I've heard some pretty funny things. So I'll go ahead and start. And so I remember this really, really funny thing that happened. This was, probably I want to say this was probably year 3, year 4 of teaching. And I'll never forget, it was a parent teacher conference. And this one gentleman had said, "Hey, do y'all have a family movie night that you guys do at the school?" And I said, "Well, no, I don't think so, but that would be a pretty good idea. That's a great way to build community." And he said, "Yeah, I think it'd be a great idea if I could he's like, "You think I could set up shop in the back?" Like, I was like, "Well, what do you mean? Like run the movie?" He says, "No, no, I got bootlegs that I think I could sell for everybody." It's like, "Oh, I don't think you can do that, sir." He said they're really good quality too. It's
yeah,
like, I don't think they're going to approve that. Anyway, we've had some funny ones over the years. That one still rings true. So funny still today. I don't know if he ever sold those bootlegs, but whatever.
yeah,
But what
that's
about
so
you?
funny.
What about you? Do you remember any like funny things that maybe when you were a teacher or excuse me, when you were a teacher or a principal, any like funny mishaps or awkward moments that you remember over the course of your career?
Oh, probably too many to mention here at this point, but I do know one that that was funny and scared me at the same time. I had this little kindergartner, and he was a runner. He would get to the class and everybody think he's in there, and I'd be the last eyes on him. Did he get in there? Did he go through the line? Did he teacher welcome him to class? Did he get into the classroom? And he got me one day. He's into the classroom. And this was after several days of me having to find him on the playground. And so I go back to my office, and my secretary comes in. This is a principal. As a principal, she came into my office, and she says to me, Mr. Ducharme, he's out of the classroom again. And I said, really? And she said, yes, he is. So I step out of the office to go find him, and there he is waiting for me on the lawn. He's looking at me. It was like a showdown in the Wild West. And so here, so here we are. And I take a step towards him. He takes a step back. I take a step. Anyway, and this goes on, and I go, you're not getting away. You have to go to class. I spoke to your mother. And so we end up in this running match. I feel like I'm in the Olympics at this point. I'm chasing him down, running across this, that, and the other. And I get all right, real close to him, and I'm saying, you need to stop. You need to stop. And what does he do? He drops down right in front of me as I'm running about at a gallop. And I had to jump over him, and I fall on the grass. And I look back, and he's looking at me with the biggest smile and laugh on his face. And I'm saying, what is this coming to? But anyway, there are moments like that go well outside the classroom, just for, we're supposed to be in a safe and orderly environment. This was definitely my intention, but I think in the end of it, I was the one that was probably in the most unsafe, since that little guy just dropped right at my ankles, and I had a split second to get over the top of him and roll over in the wet grass in my brand new suit. So that, and I look back and I said, "You got me, kid. You got me."
Man. That's funny. Well, I can certainly relate to some of those funny stories. And by the way, I'm thinking that for Christmas this year, I'm going to get you like, a gold medal that says, world-class hurdler. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, trust me. I
Never
never
heard
thought
that
I was so agile.
Oh man, that's funny. I distinctly remember one story, and I don't know if you remember, but I was a youngster. I believe I was in 6th grade at the time. Our school had not started yet, and then yours had, or for some reason I was in your classroom, and I was sitting in the back, and I remember this little girl, and you're probably gonna remember this. She was speaking, and she got so nervous while she was speaking, she just started like nervously unbuttoning her shirt, and I was like, what the heck is going on here? And so you just kept your cool, and you were like, whatever. And then like she didn't like open it, she just unbuttoned, and then she rebuttoned, and then she unbuttoned, and then she rebuttoned. I was like, okay, this is interesting. But you just never know what you're gonna get in education. I tell you, there's just some funny moments, but that's the choice.
Well, I've often said there's never a dull moment in education. And so the minute you walk in through your classroom doors, I mean, you're on the spot.
Absolutely.
And a master teacher one told me at one point in time in my life, you really need to be able to get on the go,
Yeah.
because something can happen at any particular time in the classroom. You could have a power outage. You no longer have your technology working for you. You got a whiteboard or a chalkboard back in that time.
Yep.
And you better be able to put something out there for those kids. So there are moments where you're put on the spot and the kids are watching you. You always think, oh, I'm the teacher, I'm going to make sure that my class functions properly. But there are times when all of a sudden your bag, the bag that you're working out of just went down. And as a result of that, now you have to be that teacher, and you have to be spontaneous, and you have to be able to keep control and manage the system so that all students will benefit from what the expectation is.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you just never know sometimes what's going to happen. So, I'd like to ask one more question to you, because I just think as a principal and boss, you hear sometimes the wildest things, not just from students, but particularly staff. And I think some of our listeners will appreciate this, especially people that are principals themselves or aspiring administrators. But what is the funniest or like craziest excuse that you've ever gotten from somebody? maybe for
Uh,
like not coming into work or not getting a task done, something of that nature.
well, there's always in the business of being an administrator, you always have to display what's going on best within the school. And so you really have to count on your staff to step forward and to be those people in the places that you need them in order to have the success of whatever the event is. And I've had a teacher come to me on like the 11th hour and say, you know what, I'm not going to be able to make it. And I asked the teacher, well, why won't you? What is this that you have a family emergency? Is there something that's really outstanding here? Um, no, they had to go pick up their pet. They had to pick up their pet
What pet?
from
What kind of
grooming.
pet was it?
And I'm saying, you're kidding me, right? You want to go pick up your pet? There's nobody else. And that was the excuse. And so this was a sports awards banquet. One of the teachers that was involved with that, and they told me that, and I thought to myself, that has got to be one of the things that really is just too far out there. I said, I can't believe that. And then there's obviously the real obvious things is when you have the expectation of a classroom walkthrough and you know what the expectation is, you've done it, you come out of the classroom, you ask the teacher to come visit with you later on in the day, and you ask them inquisitively, why wasn't that being done in the classroom? Why weren't you presenting that to the students? And the blatant answer was, I didn't feel that it was something I needed to do. After you'd already gone through all the staff development and everything that was in, and it's like, I can't believe that this just happened to me. Everybody else is in line, and I've got this one individual, or could be more than one, once
Yeah.
the doors close, that they just felt that the staff development wasn't worth it, or that the objective that we were trying to attain just wasn't worth their
Yeah.
time to implement in the
And
classroom.
that's tough. You spend time, money, resources, training teachers and in the hope that, they'll implement some of those things, and sometimes they just don't. But yeah, I've heard some funny excuses over the years. I mean, there's always, somebody obviously that is got explosive diarrhea, and they just can't they just can't get something done, They're just, squirting out of both ends, It's like, oh, okay. All right. That's a pretty wild excuse. You could have just said you're sick. That's cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, always a hoot. You never know what you're going to get. So I still haven't had anybody say, though, like you, that they got to go pick up their pet pig or something like that.
I was just floored with that. I said,
My
really?
parrot needs some emotional support.
It was something to that effect. But I tell you, but on the other hand, I've got to commend the teachers that will stand up and take the place of that individual. And I call it standing in the gap. And if they're willing to do that, then I have to say that that is something that I could admire in any
Yeah.
kind of individual that would call themselves an educator.
Yeah, I mean, camaraderie between teachers is something like no other. I mean, you want to talk about teamwork and the power of that is truly amazing. I mean, most teachers I know that they'll put the skin off their back just to support their fellow teachers. So that's impressive. But thank you for some of those funny stories. That's great. It's always good to start the show that way. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of jump into a little bit more of the serious side, a little bit more of the inspirational side. So I want you to tell me when you knew, like the moment you knew, like education, this is my calling. What was that moment for you?
It's almost subliminal. I mean, in a lot of ways, that calling in and of itself, because I was in the private sector for a lot of years. I worked for corporations, and was basically a hands-on guy. I went through an apprenticeship in building, and so I spent a lot of my years, almost close to 20 of them, outside of the classroom. But all the while, I'm picking up information and experiences that are going to transpose themselves once I get into the classroom, because now I could rely on that experience more so than the other person working in the room next to me, because they just didn't have those private sector experiences. So as I came into it, and I already expressed to you about my family and how they were educators, and so that was always rolling in the back of my mind. And then I would meet people that went through formal education versus those that didn't. And I can remember distinctly this one individual when I was working for an automotive industry. I was a welder. We were on our break, and it was out there at lunchtime. And I listened to this individual. This individual was so well spoken, communicated so well, and I thought to myself, that formal education really does have an effect. And so some years passed, and I was still working in construction, and the day came. I was a foreman on the job I was doing, but the economy was such the construction went down,
Mm.
lost a job. Meanwhile, I had to go home to a wife and to a newborn baby, which was you. And I had to say, I can't do this no more. I can't
Mm.
stay in the private sector. I need security for the family. I need to do something with my life more than just swinging a hammer. Not that that's bad.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong here. I still delve in the idea of building things, but at that moment in time, I just made my mind up. It's time to go back to school. It's time to get your education. It's time to do something that's going to be meaningful and really provide some substance to your life. So at that point, I made the decision, entered back into education as a reentry student. All
Mm.
the kids that were sitting next to me were, youngsters, and here is the old guy, or at that time I thought it was, sitting there in a college chair along all these youngsters and trying to get the job done. And I'm
Yeah.
sure my story is not unlike a lot of stories out there of people that have re-entered into education.
Yeah.
But I knew at that point in time, this is a road, this was a path that I needed to follow, and it's been well to me.
Yeah.
It's done good for me.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I see sometimes teachers that have a similar sort of journey as you, where they've had careers outside of teaching, and they've put in sometimes 20 years doing something else. I mean, our military is a good representation of
Mhm.
that. A lot of times,
Absolutely.
teachers that have been in the military for so many years, and then they transition into teaching and teaching others. It's really a pretty common thing. So yeah, certainly the corporate experience provided you a little bit of the understanding of that education is important, and it definitely provides opportunities for you to lead outside of the blue
Well,
collar work.
everybody knows our business sectors and are
Mhm.
saying that the workers that are coming to their place of business are not prepared. I mean, I've asked students that I've come across, and I'm saying, how well has your education prepared you? Many
Yeah.
times I find the answer is they're not prepared. And that's
Right.
that's a whole nother issue of where our focus should be on in the curriculum aspect and how we prepare kids and support families to make sure that their child is actually getting that um, free, fair public education where
Right.
they get an honest opportunity to sit in a classroom and learn from educators that have their best interests in mind.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's a tough bout as a leader, but it's definitely something that we always have to keep a beat on our heads for. So certainly in education over the years, I'm certain that you've run into challenges that have been easily solvable, and then others not as much. Right? I can think of some specifically with myself that when I was a school site administrator, that were extremely challenging, and things that I had absolutely no clue how to handle, and reached out for advice to other fellow administrators because I simply just didn't know what to do. And I think that's like kind of the heart of what this podcast is about, is really about providing some insights into some of those things. So I guess the question that I'd like to ask is, what's one of the toughest challenges that you ever faced in the course of your tenure as a principal,
Hmm.
and how did you handle it?
Well, there's been actually a couple of them over time. Um, One is actually having to do with school closure.
Mm.
The first time I experienced a school closure is based on budgetary concerns within the district and the options that were out there as to how to best keep the district solvent and financially able to maintain the integrity of what they are doing in the classrooms. So it required closing down a school building. So
Mm.
I was working in programs at that time. I wasn't even a principal. I was an administrator in programs, overseeing school grants. And the superintendent of the school district called me over into the office. I went over in the office, and he says, "I'm moving you and to another assignment, and I'd like you to listen to what I'm offering you to do." And basically, it was to go in as an interim principal for a middle school that they felt that financially they couldn't manage the operations of that school and do it physically responsible. So
Mm.
I was sent in there, and with with replacing a principal that had just left the district,
Mm.
and I went into that situation for 1 year and had to maintain the classroom structures, had to definitely wind down all the operations in the school to the day we closed the doors and locked the doors and eventually left the site. So that was like just right off the cuff. Just one day walk into superintendent's office, next day you have so much time to shut down a school and transition teachers to other job sites within the district. So it was a handful. It was certainly a mindful. I mean, I had to take everything into consideration and really leave no rock unturned. Were there people that were disgruntled because the school was being shut down, that their jobs were being removed, that they had been there with this other principal for so many years? Absolutely. So not only did I have to do the functional side of things for the best potential for outcomes, but I also had to communicate and maintain um, the relationships with teachers that felt that they were being thwarted in a
Mm.
way. So it was difficult. It was a
Yeah.
difficult time. I managed to keep the relationships. They still weren't happy when they got uh, reassigned to additional sites and classrooms. So it was arduous for them, and it was certainly arduous for me.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it did occur, and it was successful. But I had to wear those scars as a principal or the administrator to shut the school down. So
Mm.
that was difficult for me, but nonetheless, I'm big enough to understand what the overall picture is. And then the second one was the same thing. It was school closure, but this time it's
Mm.
COVID. It's when the
Yeah.
pandemic hit. And basically at that point, it was, we're giving you these messages. This is what the protocol is going to be. County office will take responsibility for districts and schools within those districts. Will follow that protocol. And everything just changed overnight. And it was the teachers. I could still remember teachers crying. I
Mm.
could see their faces even as I'm speaking about it now, and students wondering what was going to go on, how they were going to be able to get their educations. Parents flocked the school sites wondering what's going to happen with their kids, and all of the different protocols that we were putting out, and the information that was being sent out to the parents and the students and teachers and everybody involved in the district as to what it was going to mean for a school complete shutdown. And we already know what some of the ramifications were. That we actually lost um, educational learning for, I guess you could say, students lost about a year, maybe more, in their education. And so all of that was just out in the forefront. We're going, how are we going to do this? Some districts were ahead of the curve. I thought we were. I thought we managed it well. The segues for students to get their curriculum, even though it was in packets at first, but eventually moved to online situations where students were able to maintain their schedules on an online format. But we still had problems because we were in a rural area and we had to buy hotspots and we had to make sure that everybody was tuned in. And then how do you do that?
Right.
I'm on a podcast with you right now. I'm looking at you on a screen. You're looking at me on a screen. But many times we know those students, they could just shut down their screens and say I was in class. and and I think those are some of the reasons why we lost some of the groundwork that we had in education. We already
Right.
know that once the summertime hits and we put students on summer vacation, they're going to lose close to about 20% of what they learned the previous year.
Yeah.
So this was no easy task. This was something that I took very seriously, and as a result of that, I just think that there were some things that were lost in education, but I think we
Yeah.
learned a lot too along the way.
Yeah, I think we did learn a lot. I mean, obviously, nothing in the world I think could prepare anybody. I mean, in any sector, really, but education specifically could ever have thought that what we had to go through like that was. I mean, you can't prepare for that. Is it no matter what, no credential program, no experience. Even if you've been in for 20 plus years, nothing could ever prepare you for that. So, I mean, I would say the saving grace with all of that was the network of people that you had that you could rely on and ask questions and figure it out together. I mean, really, that's what it came down to. But certainly, challenges in education are sometimes small, and then there's sometimes massive. And as administrators, sometimes you got to bear the weight of all of that.
Absolutely.
And I would say that that's probably one of the hardest things that I don't feel that our current university system really stresses to our principals is that really the buck stops with you, and everything that you are in charge of, ultimately it all falls on you. And that's a tremendous amount of responsibility, but also stress. And so I think there should be a little bit of a push towards teaching administrators in that way and how to handle kind of that work-life balance and creating that sort of that way to de-stress and things of that nature, because it could really just tear you up if you don't take care of that. So yeah, well, thank you for sharing all of those things. So I guess one of the other questions that I'd want to ask for you is, can you think about an impactful moment with a staff member that maybe you were working with and they succeeded under your leadership? And how did they succeed under your leadership? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there's really a lot to really bring forward in that. I think one of the things that I really just enjoyed the most, and I share this story very often, is is a call that I received some years after the student had been in my classroom, and we had we'd done a lot of work, and the student was very good um, at what she did. So I get a call uh, about 10 o'clock in the evening.
Hmm.
And I answer the phone, and I go, "Hello," and she goes, "Mr. Ducharme, is that you?" I said, "Yes. Who's this?" "This is Graciela." "Gracie," I could just call her Gracie. "Gracie, how you doing?" And I go, "Why are you calling me, today?" And she says, "I just got here today." And I said, "Where?" And she goes, "I'm at UCLA. I'm a pre-med student." And
Wow.
I thought to myself, wow, I'm so proud of you. I told her, I'm just so proud of you. Her name was uh, Graciela Soto. And she was just an amazing young lady,
Hmm.
smart, very good, but quiet, but yet reserved in a way that she always kept things in order in her life. And it's a call like that that comes back to you, and it speaks to, you know, I was one individual. There were many individuals that involved in her life as far as her education, but she took the time to call me. And I don't know if she called other teachers. It's really uh, doesn't matter. The fact that I got the call and that she was a pre-med student at UCLA, most likely a doctor today,
Hmm.
uh, working in the medical field. but it's individuals like that, students like that make a difference in your life, and continue to set for you that it's a good day in education. I'm
Yeah.
doing the right thing. Um, Another student, I got an email probably 6 months ago. Hadn't heard from the student forever, and saw me on Facebook, and um, said I needed to reach out to you. And he's a journalist. He's
Hmm.
a writer. And it's students like that that you had an impact on their lives, and they're still willing to reach back out to you and tell you thank you for what you did in the contributions of their life, and as far as their education goes. And I will end with this one, because this one is it's the creme de la creme for me. Um, I've been retired, but I went back, and they called me back because they had a situation where they didn't have a teacher to cover a kindergarten classroom. And I often said, kindergarten classrooms, those teachers are gold, man. They are just absolute gold. And so here I am. I'm looking around the classroom, and I'm going through the motion of my day. The aide had left the classroom, so it's just me and the kids, and I got to get them ready. And it's, for lack of a better term, it's probably almost like herding cats, because these kids are like, okay, we can do this, guys. So we get all the way out in line. We're ready to march down the sidewalk, and the little guy right in the back, and I stay at the back of the line so I could see all the kids, make sure they're all moving in the right direction. And I get a couple hoodwinks from other kindergarten teachers that see me coming through, and they go, "Oh, there's our principal running a kindergarten class now. He's finally getting the worth of it." And so this little guy, right at the end, I look down, and I see him, and he's looking up at me, and I say, "You doing okay?" And he goes, "I love you, Mr. Ducharme." It melted
It's
my heart.
oh man, I
Melted
tell you,
my
you
heart.
know
I go,
what?
now I know why they do this. This is
Yeah.
fantastic.
I've always said, if you ever need a pick me up, or you need some self-worth encouragement, just walk down the kinder hall. Hugs and I love you so much all day long.
All day long.
All day
All day long.
long.
And they'll find you
Every
out on
time
the
I
playground.
remember, every time I would leave, this was in the latter part of my career when I was teaching robotics and engineering, and every time I'd leave the TK room after we're done, they mostly loved the toys. I think they liked me, but I think they mostly loved the toys. But they would, this one girl, she would always say, "I love you with all my heart."
Yeah, that's
So
a fact.
yeah, you just, if you ever need any pickup, you just go by the kinder hall. You're good to go. You're a king.
Absolutely, man.
But I will
Absolutely.
say, though, that you did say something that I think administrators should really take a note of. And this is something out of my playbook. And that is that you should never, ever, ever, and this is my personal opinion, and I could be totally wrong, but you should never, ever get to the point in your career where you're too high and mighty to get your
Mm,
butt in the classroom. Because
that's it.
I've always said that you're not the lifeblood of the organization. You really aren't. The teachers are the lifeblood of the organization. And the moment an administrator forgets what it's like to be a teacher in the classroom, you need to hang your hat, or you need to go back in the classroom. I felt strongly about that for years. And I told my teachers that when I was a principal. I had said, I'm going to say something very audacious and something that most principals probably wouldn't say. And I told them at a staff development, I distinctly remember I was standing, it was the beginning of the year, and I said, I want all of you to hold me accountable. The moment that you feel that I don't know what I'm doing because I have been out of the classroom for so long, you tell me. And I will schedule time to get in your classroom. And I will get in there and teach lessons. There's nothing more important to me than remembering what it's like to be a teacher. And so when you said you had to go into the kinder classroom, sometimes principals, they don't want to do that stuff anymore, and it takes, honestly, like, I come back to this whole idea of being a rebel leader. And for me to say that, I mean, most leaders sometimes don't do that. That was my moment. That was my rebel leader audacious moment, where I said something and I stood by it for quite some time. And I think teachers respected that. So I guess one of the questions that I would ask you is, kind of, we're getting ready to close this thing out here, is, can you think about a time in your time as principal or in a leadership role that maybe you had to make some unconventional or some rebellious leadership move that, struck something with the staff and or your other fellow administrators?
Well, yes. In answer to your question, there was a time, and it came under the Bush administration, or closing the achievement gap. That was a real difficult time, and because of the disparities that we had in areas of core curriculum, um, basically statistics and numbers are going to tell it out in a lot of ways. So there were some uncomfortable conversations that we had to have, particularly with teachers that I felt that really needed some additional assistance in their classrooms. And one of the things that teachers don't really appreciate is the fact that you're going to drill down into their lesson plans and say,
Mm-hmm.
well, we're going to have this individual in your classroom, and their classrooms are sacred. They're, this is my classroom, that type of thing. So there were some times where teachers were very uncomfortable and disagreed with some of the things that I felt that they needed assistance in, and even to the point where modeling lessons for them so that they could see how that lesson was implemented, and that the full process of the lesson plan was being observed by myself or others as we would go into the classroom. So there was always those uncomfortable conversations, and just to hold your line to
Yep.
say, I'm sorry, um, I'm going to just respectfully disagree with you at this point, and these are the needs within your classroom. These are the things that should be evaluated, and be able to be observed to be evaluated. And unless I'm observing them, I have no other recourse but to provide you with the assistance and the training that you would need. And I understand you're very you have a certain prowess about your educational pedagogy, but nonetheless, it doesn't meet the expectation. And for somebody in an administrative position to be able to go to another, a credentialed individual, licensed by the state of California and so forth, and to
Mm-hmm.
say, it's not good enough.
Yep.
And when you have to tell somebody it's not good enough, they're gonna put up their feelers, and they're not gonna be the happiest people on campus. That's just not gonna be the case. And so
Yep.
closing the achievement gap really brought a lot of that about, because we really were taking a hard look on
Yep.
how we were going to implement this program or programming, to the point where we were bringing teachers into a setting for instruction that was targeting on bringing in or closing that achievement gap, which was no easy task. I'm not sure we were overly successful about it, but the conversations around it, the involvement of County Office of Education, the requirements from the federal government, and the funding that came forward from that, it was all an expectation of excellence, not an expectation of falling short on any stretch, for any stretch of the imagination. So it was a difficult time. We did our parts. We went through all the training as we would do as administrators to
Mm-hmm.
fully implement and do the things that we needed to segue into our instructional formats. And as that came forward, we found things that we had to continue to refine. And even those conversations, well, when is it going to be good enough? Well, we're not quite there yet. And so that those reminders to our staff, it really put the staff in a lot of ways um, cautious,
I would say on the defensive, yeah, a little bit, yeah.
defensive. Yeah, they felt that way. So it was one of those difficult moments that I look at um, in regards to that. But I would say that would be the one, because the pendulum's always swinging in education.
Right.
One way, 1 minute we're saying um, this is the expectation, and then 5, 10 years go slip by, different administrations come in, and now this is where we're going with education.
Mhm.
I personally, I believe that we should be teaching arithmetic,
Mhm.
writing, and reading. And we should be doing that to the best of our abilities
Yep.
in order to really rise forward and upward into higher levels of acceptance of where we stand in education.
Yeah.
Today, presently, I don't from my perspective, I think there's a lot of things that are coming at our schools and particularly our
Mm.
administrators to handle,
Yeah.
that a lot of different avenues that they could go down. And I'll finish with this one. The school I worked at was a two-way language school. And so we had both languages, um, Spanish and English, being taught on site. And so there were some difficult parts of that when it first in because everybody was against it. Everybody, why do we need to do this? Why do we need to do that? Well, in order to allow students access to the curriculum, the two-way programs became very important. And then we started finding out about bilingualism and becoming bilingual literate, and what that meant to our students and to the community, and how we could best get a firm footing for students that prospectively their primary language was not English. So those were obstacles that we had to go through. And then, of course, all the training and the certificates of B-CLADs, where bilingual language academic um, curriculum or instruction could take place by people that were certified to do so.
Mhm.
So you had one school of thought on the campus that, well, I'm an English classroom, I teach English. And then you have another school of thought that says, no, we're a two-way program. So
Mm.
melding those two early on in the early stages of two-way programming and biliteracy became a real difficult challenge for any administrator, uh,
Yeah.
whether you be at the state, whether you be at the county, or whether you be at the local level.
Yeah. That's a lot to take in. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a lot of things. I would say that over the course of my career, as both teacher and also as school administrator, is some of the things that I've had to make tough decisions on, or rebellious decisions on, so to speak, is certain things that maybe I didn't agree with, and certain things that were going to turn some heads. And so sometimes when we have to implement programs, or when it comes down from the high level districts and you just don't necessarily agree, and as a leader, you have that autonomy to say, no, we're going to do it this way. And I feel like sometimes that's those ways, and that many new administrators are terrified to do, because they're fresh into the administration and or the profession itself. But I feel like that is that moment where it defines you, right? And so for me, I've always been somebody who's led that careful line of where do I stand in my own personal beliefs in this? And is there a way to, one, meld the two, or have a conversation maybe with some of the other people that potentially, you could get your point across, and or come up with a different point of view that they might take into consideration. So I've always been somebody that has led like that, where I've got kind of this not rebellious attitude of like, I'm going to completely and utterly always disobey you and go my own way.
Right.
But it's always been something of, I should lead with I should lead with what I believe in, and I should lead with what I think the school would benefit from, my staff would benefit from, my students would benefit from, right? So we're faced with those moments, and we're faced with those times that we have to potentially make tough decisions, and sometimes it can be career ending, and that's terrifying. It's terrifying for a lot
Well,
of people.
I would say this. As an administrator, there's only one way I became administrator. Well, I shouldn't say one way. That's too absolute. I would say there were multiple ways in which I became an administrator, but the bottom line rests with the school board. You
Yeah.
serve at the pleasure of the board. That's what you do. The superintendent's there, but they answer to the board. And so we try to do as much as we can within our leadership meetings to make sure that we're all on track. And if we have new ideas, we're willing to share them, and we'll share it out in leadership before it ever hits the classroom. And it's usually done under the auspice of the office of superintendency,
Right.
which many times are right there in the meeting, or assistant superintendents of curriculum and such for
Yeah.
large districts, and even human resources for that matter.
Yeah, you can't
I,
forget those guys.
they're in the room. They're drinking coffee right with you,
Yeah.
and we're sharing ideas and taking notes. And we have the general direction from the superintendent, but there may be things on your campus
Right, that
that
are
you
vastly
feel
different than
that
other campuses.
just don't meet the criteria that we're speaking about.
And
And
that's
so in
that's
that
that's
regard,
exactly what I'm talking about.
yeah, you could walk away with your notes, but in the end, you may tweak it a little bit, and you may find out about it later. I thought we were doing this. Well,
Yeah.
I might want to take this one on my chin because I really think this is best.
See, and I feel like that's some great advice, because and that's always how I've led, where it's taking the advice and taking the things that we're doing, but maybe making it your own and making it towards it fits towards, your campus and whatnot. So if I could give any advice to administrators, it'd be that. So, well, Dad, I want to thank you so much for all of this. But let's close out the show a little fun. We're going to do what I
Okay.
call the speed round. This is off the record, not really off the record. You're still on the air, okay? But
Okay,
we're going to call
thanks.
this the speed round. So I'm going to throw out some questions to you. First thing that comes to your mind, boom, shout it out. Ready? All right. So, walking into the cafeteria, what's your favorite lunchroom food that you take that you remember?
Oh, they don't do it no more, but it used to be, Thanksgiving time, man. The cafeteria staff would have the turkey and
Turkey and the
all the
gravy and
stuff,
all
and
that stuff.
and we were
Okay.
having a great time.
Oh
Hey, I
man.
can't wait to get to this cafeteria food. This is great.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you see that cinnamon roll early in the morning when you got your coffee,
Mm.
but you don't have your sweet, and you go by the cafeteria and you go, "Hey, you got one of those cinnamon rolls?" And they go, "We sure do, Mr.
Yeah.
Ducharme."
See, even principals come by and snatch some of that food. I know. I remember Friday was always pizza day. I waited till the very end of all the lunches. I said, "What's left over? Give me some of that pizza." All right. So, what's the worst teacher's lounge snack that's in there? Teachers put in there.
Oh, golly. Um, there was one time I said to my fellow teacher at the time, I was teaching 5th grade, and they brought in this, I don't know, it was like a bran loaf, I guess. And, this is
Somebody was having
California.
some
I
fiber
mean,
problems. They got some bran. I got a whole loaf of bran. I got.
bran loaf, man.
They're gonna.
And so
You're.
they
You know
got
what?
it
You're the
cut up.
principal. You're gonna have to go and give this person breaks because they had too many bran. They're gonna have to go into the bathroom.
So it's cut up, and I'm thinking, okay, this is pretty good. And then I cut it, and I picked up a cut piece, and I bit into it, and it was like hard as rock. And I looked at the teacher, my buddy that was sitting next to me, another 5th grade teacher, because we always broke together, had breaks together. And I said, "Man, I just think they fired this brick just too long, man. This thing is hard." And I said,
Yeah.
"Look at the bottom of it; it's even kind of burnt." So, that was probably the thing that I remember most. But generally speaking, I cannot leave this podcast without saying, we had some really good potlucks. There was some really, really good. I mean, some of these teachers could put some things together, and I always loved the birthday potlucks. We could go in there and, your break time and stuff, and it'd be great. As principal, I would bring in donuts. like
Hey,
on Fridays. And,
there you go.
teachers love donuts. So, there was always some goodies in there, but the worst one that I ever came across was that bran loaf. You
I
might as well
I remember
bury that
I used
recipe, sweetheart.
I used to work with a gal, and let me tell you, I love her to death. And I ran into her not too long ago, and I reminded her of this, but it was when I was teaching second grade, and she was very, very healthy. And she would go to this one place that was normally a place where you would go if you like if you wanted to detox, and you would like eat all this healthy, and everything was like live type food, right? So it was like these like sprouts, and I don't even know what all this stuff was, but she would bring this stuff in, and we would meet at second grade, and we'd eat together as a team. And that thing, she would open that thing up, and it would reek like compost. I mean, it smelled like, basically that's probably what it was. She was probably eating compost. And
Yeah.
we always told her, we were like, go outside, open that thing up outside, and let it air out a little bit so we can stand you. And so I ran into her not too long ago at a ball game, and I said, "Hey, you still eating those weird foods?" And she said no, but that was the worst. Oh man, I tell you, the lounge food that holds the stank in, that's the worst thing, leftover fish and things like that. So, oh man, so many great things. Well, Dad, I appreciate you being on the show with me. The very first one of the Rebel Leader. Great words of advice. I'm glad we were able to share some laughs together. And I really appreciate you giving me your time and helping other fellow administrators and educators out in all of that. So if I could close this out with one piece of advice, what is one nugget of advice that you would give educators or school leaders who are striving to break that mold and create that lasting change within their school and or in education as a whole? And
I would say this: take in the information that you need. You need to have informational format to move forward with anything. Understand what your audience is, and audiences change based on demographics and school sites as such. So understand. I've said this. Number one rule: there is a system. Number two rule: figure how you fit into that system. It could be an sundry of things that you have to take into consideration. But I would tell any aspiring administrator, be true to yourself, be true to your calling, and be true to those that are working with you so that together you can move forward. There's not going to be any easy days. You're going to come in at 8 o'clock in the morning, just walking onto campus, and the next thing you know, over the loudspeakers, and Mr. Ducharme, can you come to the office? And it's going to be that way. It's going to be spontaneous. It's going to be challenging, but it's going to be rewarding at the same time. The last year that I left in education, I did close that achievement gap in a lot of ways. We were in dire straits, and we were in the red, but moved everything up into basic, in the core content areas, through hard work and diligence and a respect for the classroom, and getting the motivation, whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic, in your students to work and to bring the best out in them. That's your job. If you could do that, the plant operations, the school functioning, the buses, the cafeteria, the maintenance stuff, that's all going to be taken care of if you do it systematically.
yeah.
But our primary goal is to educate students. Your primary goal as an administrator is to administrate that in a way that you bring people along through true leadership. So if you want to call yourself a leader, it's not for the faint of heart.
Mm.
It's for those people that are willing to accept those challenges, and sometimes the righteous indignation that comes along with it, because people will find you out. And first and foremost, when that occurs, you're going to have some very personal conversations with people, and you're going to learn from it. I would like to have said and have completed writing a book that says, "So you want to be an administrator?" There are a lot of things and excerpts that we could bring forward into that.
Yeah.
It's not a one-liner. It's not something that's just going to just come off and look at me, I'm an administrator. No, there's so many facets to it. There's so many. I have felt at times where the only person in the room was me. I felt like everybody had abandoned me, and I'm solely sitting there with the thoughts of, what am I going to do in this case? And ultimately, given the time and the effort, you find options and solutions to real problems that exist within our education. Yeah. We are still faced today with the idea of where education is going. Our students are being inundated, teachers are being inundated, administrators are being inundated, districts are being inundated by outside voices that are communicating to us what the necessities are. I don't see it that way. I see it as local autonomy. What can we do at the local level with our school boards and our teachers, and to invite the teachers union to the table to make sure that we are putting forward our best opportunities for all individuals involved in the educational system. These are trying times. We are at a point now where we're continuing to fall behind in core areas of mathematics and reading, and that's very evident. We hear those statistics all the time, but the change is going to come from change agents. Administrators, you need to be a change agent, and you need to do it in a way that you become the catalyst. You become the catalyst. You become that change agent, and then you bring people with you that are of the same mindset, and hopefully success will fall.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds like it's a chapter in your book.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
Well, I want to thank you so much for an awesome and incredible conversation today. And for all of you listeners out there, I hope you found inspiration in some of these stories and also some laughter, and that, we in this business, we got to laugh. So thank you so much. As we wrap up, Dad, I want to thank you. I want to thank all of the people that are tuning in to the Rebel Leader podcast, Shattering the Status Quo. It is clear that being a true leader in education, it means embracing the challenges. It means pushing those boundaries. It means always striving to make a real difference in our communities. And so if you enjoyed this show, make sure to give it a like, subscribe, hit that bell icon, and leave a review, leave a comment, share it with your fellow educators and leaders. Together, we can continue to challenge the norms and create lasting change in our schools and also in our communities. Remember, it is not about fitting into the old system. It's about rewriting the rules and being bold enough to lead with vision. So until next time, keep shattering the status quo and embracing the rebel leader within. I'll see you on the next episode.
Hey, we all want to scale our business. Hey, I have the answer for you today to help you do that. If you're looking to scale from 5, 6, even 7 figures and beyond, book called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. I'm going to give it to you for free. All you have to do is type in growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and you can download the book for absolutely free. I hope the book helps you this year. Take your business to the next level. Again, go grab the book, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. I wish you the best and grow, scale, and win.
Thanks for listening to the Rebel Podcast, Shattering the Status Quo, sponsored by Strategic Advisor Board, with new episodes each week. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.
There it is. Magnum. Holy moly.
Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for!
Dear God.